Now, it's my pleasure to introduce you to Michael Schenk, who will be presenting a session called Beyond Business Capabilities, Architecting the Enterprise. Michael is a thought leader and executive specializing in addressing transformation and operational excellence challenges through his innovative process-based framework. With 25 plus years in the financial services industry, he's primarily served as a consultant, empowering clients with forward-thinking solutions in the technology process and risk and spearheading large-scale business and digital transformations. His book, Digital Transformation Success, introduces his groundbreaking process inventory framework. So really looking forward to hearing more about this, and I know it'll be a great presentation. Over to you, Michael.
Thanks, Melissa. Thanks for having me, and thanks for everyone joining today. As the title alludes to, Beyond Business Capability, how really a process-first approach I think is the path to greater success for enterprise architects. And as Melissa mentioned, make this as interactive as possible. So please drop those questions or comments, and we'll answer them as they come up. I'll be showing just some slides here as well, but then I'll also show a demo of what the model looks like, and as well as what this looks like in a digital twin type environment. So a little bit more about me. So as Melissa mentioned, I spent most of my career in consulting. Started my career actually at Accenture as a technologist. I was a Java, C++ programmer. I was a solution architect. I ran large system implementation programs. Then I moved on to Bank of America for 2 years, where I led a development team, so still in technology. Then I moved over to, and that's important for a couple of reasons, which I'll mention, but then I moved over to Ernst & Young, and at that point, they did not have a mature technology practice. So that's where I really had to focus on more of the business side. And one of the first projects I was introduced to was creating a business capability model for a large bank. And coming from a technology perspective, it was really enlightening. So during this project, we interviewed some people in the business, created a business capability model for the retail bank that went a couple levels deep. And it was just such an epiphany moment for me that coming from technology, I really had no clue what the business did. But then I got to see everything on a sheet of paper. So I decided to brand myself as the business architect. But then as I started to engage with clients and started to really tackle a lot of scenarios, and through my career, I've probably been in over 100 companies, working on everything from strategy definition, transformation program setup and running, IT architecture design, risk and compliance, large program delivery, you name it. I realized that business capabilities don't go far enough, that you really need to get down to what processes are being executed to understand how the environment actually operates. So through that time, I developed my process inventory framework, created a full playbook on it, and I started engaging clients on many different topics. And it really just takes the chaos and the complexity out, gets everyone into alignment, and delivered success everywhere I used it. From there, I went on to Citibank, where their context is they're undergoing a large control transformation program. In 2020, they got hit with a $400 million consent order tied to their lack of compliance, meeting compliance needs and operational risks, and really leveraged this framework at scale and really brought a lot of clarity to where there was missing controls or poorly defined controls to help them with that program. I left Citi. I felt compelled to get all my knowledge in a book. It's called Digital Transformation Success. If you like this presentation, want to learn more, then feel free to pick it up. It's on Amazon. And I'm also a board member of American Association for Business Process Management, ABPMP, and I have my own consulting company, Process Inventory Advisors, where I help clients adopt this framework and drive value through it. So architecting the enterprise, I have a lot of friends that are enterprise architects, and I've been reading a lot of articles lately that state that enterprise architects should not be under the CIO, that it's really right now just a technology, strategy, governance practice, but that really it should break out of that, report to a higher level, maybe the CIO or the COO, and really architect everything about the enterprise. Unfortunately, what's left out in those conversations and those articles is what is the root cause of why that is, and how do you get beyond it? But right now, the impact seems to be, at least in my experience, is it's just IT. But there's a lot of different components that need to be considered if you want to break out of that. What is the strategy? So what is the health of the organization, both externally and internally? And how do you define what the course is and the 1, 3, 5 year time frame, and then define programs to get you there? How do you align people better? The change programs, and I know enterprise architects are involved in change programs, more the upfront, the shaping them and making sure that they're aligned to strategy, performance management, risk management, as I mentioned. So I think an aspiration that I've picked up in all of this is that architects are really looking to step out of the IT environment itself and grow a bigger role and really architecting what the future of the organization looks like. Oh, sorry. And beyond business capabilities, and I put a line through the business capabilities. I do think they're valuable in a sense, but I will say that in all my experiences, enterprise architects put business capabilities at the center of the universe. And I think that is a big challenge, and really the core reason why you can't bust out of that. So a little bit of background. Business capabilities are defined as organizationally agnostic. So when I was at Citibank, for instance, you can open an account in the retail bank, you can open a credit card account, you could open a mortgage account, you could open a wealth account, et cetera. So if you look at, say, an account management capability and someone says we need to invest in that, well, which one? And if you don't have that capability directly tied to those different instances, which has different technology platforms, different rules, different people, different risk profiles, et cetera, then you're really not driving kind of to what the business is looking for. And I think in a lot of my experiences too, you put a business capability in front of the business leaders, it doesn't really resonate with them because it doesn't reflect what they see as their business. And that drives the silo thinking where enterprise architects and business architects work in business capabilities, but the rest of the businesses just know what they do and the processes they perform, whether they're documented or not, they know what they do. And I think this really culminates that if enterprise architects want to step out of IT and play a larger role in shaping the organization, they need a seat at the strategy table. And you're not going to get that unless you bring something to the table that others at that, like strategy leaders, business leaders, if you're not bringing anything of value to them. And unfortunately, I don't think that's business capabilities. So a little bit about, kind of the broader picture. All organizations are looking to transform and get to operational excellence, which is the organization's ability to perform at the highest level, fully aligned with the organization's mission and vision. And that can mean many things. That can mean, and I put the graphic on the right, above the line growth, enhancing customer experience, gaining greater share of their wallet, sustaining a competitive advantage, business growth, obviously, enhancing sales, inorganic growth, integration, et cetera. And then there's below the line efficiency. So being efficient with resources, reducing complexity, increasing quality, stronger employee engagement, making sure that people really have a vested interest in what they do day to day and are performing at their highest. Data-driven decision-making, stronger risk management, and then there's kind of what I think of as straddling the line, which is scalability and agility. So the ability to push out change at a faster pace, which includes a lot of external or internal discipline, but then external ability to drive that change out. So what does excellence look like? It's consistent execution aligned to purpose. It's a culture of continuous improvement. Cross-functional collaboration, agility in the face of change, and effective use of technology assets. So what is the root cause of why some of these programs fail and why enterprise architects can't seem to get on the same page? And I think it goes back to that Cool Hand Luke quote, which is, what we have here is a failure to communicate. Is our environments that we work in are incredibly complex with technology, people, processes, third parties, all evolving as the business grows, but not necessarily intentionally designed. And every stakeholder has their own unique language and perspective. And I love to point to this famous tree swing cartoon that really illustrates it, how the customer explained it, what the project leader understood, how the analyst designed it, how the programmer wrote it. And you can see these are all different variations of the tree swing, because what we need to get to is a common language that could facilitate communication, collaboration. And I think the programs that really succeed have leaders with superhuman capabilities that keep their finger on the pulse of everything that's going on, but that's really not scalable to many businesses, obviously, because there's only so many of those leaders around. So what is the solution? The solution is getting to systems thinking, and that's understanding that transforming and getting better performance out of our organizations is a complex challenge. And systems thinking is really about solving this by viewing the organization through all the different connected parts and understanding the relationships between them and how they collectively impact performance. So in order to create that, you need a ground truth. So, and I always use the example of Google Maps is a massive data integration project because you have restaurant ratings, you have satellite imagery, you have on the ground imagery, you have traffic info, and much, much more. And what they have to do is they have to resolve it to their ground truth, which is the physical environment. But in the organizations we work today, not everything is physical. Teams could be dispersed anywhere. Really, there's nothing physical about it. So what is that ground truth? It's got to be process. So if you could understand what processes are executed in the environment, now you could tie all these different perspectives together and now gain that understanding of how they collectively impact performance. So if you do this, you could unlock all organizational knowledge to become transparent and clear to all stakeholders. You could provide that common language that facilitates alignment. You could provide clear accountability for everyone involved, including not just for change, but for also operating the environment. You could break the organizational silos by being more transparent, by giving an understanding how teams need to work together, and you could enable that data-driven organization. Another thing about alignment, so there's really two aspects of it. There's vertical alignment, so everyone from the C-suite down to individual contributors knows their role and how it specifically contributes to the achievement of the strategy. And then there's horizontal alignment, where you have all these teams from the business, technology, risks, operations, data, and much, much more, all working cohesively towards that agenda. To get to alignment, and alignment's been written about since the 80s, but it's usually kind of in terms of softer terms, like communicate better, set goals, et cetera. And those are all great. But to get to real, like tangible alignment, you need a common language that everyone could work off of. And that's where process inventory comes in. So process inventory is a process taxonomy. But what's different about it is it's comprehensive. So if you think about every process that's executed in your organization plays a role in the performance of the enterprise, or else you wouldn't do it. So it really makes sense to capture all of those processes, and it's organizationally constructed. So as you can see in this chart, there's business unit 1, business unit 2, business unit 3. And it's really an interview process going top down and understanding every process that's executed so you could capture all of those details. It requires formal attestation. So if you're going to use this to drive a transformation or an operational excellence program, everyone has to trust that information, that common language, is truly accurate of what the environment looks like. So getting stakeholders formally attested to via email or some other electronic format that, yes, this is a complete and accurate picture of my environment, really will do a lot to making sure that you could use it down the road. Ownership, and as you could see, there's ownership in a couple places here. First is process ownership at an individual organizational unit. And you could see you don't just, from this perspective, you don't just own your process, but your leader owns their process and their boss owns their process. So it's really driving a hierarchical understanding of who owns processes. But this is where business capabilities come in too. I do think they play a role, but they play a role not in describing the environment, but they play a role in describing like processes across disparate organizational or business units. So if you could understand your processes and then map each to a business capability model, now in that case that I stated for Citibank in the account opening, now I could truly have visibility. What are all the account opening type processes. So if someone says I need to invest in and improve in it, now I could say specifically which one. And if somebody wants me to rationalize them or create a shared service or outsource it, now I could look at the various nuances of each so I could design the better environment. And it's a semantic structure for data alignment, which I'll describe in a subsequent slide. This one, I think I kind of already explained, but it's really the construction process, which is top down. You go level by level, starting with the head of the BU, go down to the next level, but just you're asking everyone the question, what is it that you do? And you convert that into verb, noun, process names, and it's in a taxonomy type structure. And then I go bottoms up to get all the attestations that everyone agrees that it's accurate and complete. One other aspect of this that's important is in process modeling and process management, there's a lot of different model types out there. So you have value streams and customer journeys to describe your end-to-end. You have business capability models, process inventory, you have services, you have process models, you have a bunch of things out here. And I've been in a lot of organizations where one team's doing value streams, another one's doing process, another one's doing customer journeys, and they don't attach to each other. So it's really important to create a unified view of what the organization does. And that really requires creating a meta model, understanding how everything connects together so that everyone's looking at the same source of truth, but they're analyzing the environment from the perspective that makes sense to them. And then there's a huge data integration aspect to this as well. So in our environments, there's a lot of data that describes how we operate, but they're in siloed repositories. So you have your HR systems, which describes your org hierarchy, your people. You have your system repositories that describe your technology and the different details about it. You have risk repositories that describe your risks, your controls, your regulatory obligations, et cetera, et cetera. And they're all indexed differently. And if you need to do a current state analysis on something, you have to do a lot of digging to understand how all the data relates. But if you could take that data and link it to a platform like Avolution, which is a great platform, build libraries within your tool, and then now as I construct the process taxonomy and the individual process models, now I can start doing associations of what systems does this process use, what risks are tied to it, et cetera. So now you're really constructing a repository of all operational intelligence from that systems thinking angle. So now you understand how everything relates to everything else. And then this one is really, so now that you create all the information, you construct this repository knowledge, now what? Well, this is where it becomes valuable to an organization, that if you take a process first view on how you operate everything within your organization, now you get the benefits of that common language. So starting 11 o'clock and going clockwise, strategy to impact. So organizations in the strategy process, one of the first things that they do is they have to do an external and internal analysis. So the internal analysis is your strengths and weaknesses, your externals are your opportunities and threats. Well, if you have an understanding of all your different processes and you could do a roll-up of performance, now you could create a heat map of where there's challenges, where there's opportunities, and you could start to define where your discretionary funds go, so that your strategy and your funding are really aligned with your execution. Everything from a transformation, from defining what my transformation strategy is, creating the roadmap, managing the journey, all through that common language. Everything in the change process. So I could scope projects by what processes are impacted. I could design my target operating model, do what the current state process inventory is, what my target state inventory is, and start to design what that means for people, process technology, third parties, and much more. I develop my requirements by a process level. I do designs, controls, I test processes. I do all my change management, so my procedures, training, job aids, all aligned to the name of the process. I could do operational excellence, which is a vast bucket, but it's really looking for waste and inefficiencies and how you could streamline the environment, get better quality. Really gives you all that understanding at your fingertips. So if you're doing something like a Lean Six Sigma project, you could quickly go past the current state analysis and you're designing and implementing new solutions. enterprise architecture design, and in this context, it is more IT related, but you could do everything from defining your IT strategy by understanding what the business really needs. You could have better conversations with the business about what's coming up and do heat maps so that you could align what technology needs are coming. You could govern the architecture better. You could manage your portfolios from your application portfolios, your tech debt, your really everything in there. You could tie your business process to system interactions. There's really a lot you could do with this baseline of information. And then risk management. And I'll show you in the demo that, one of the biggest challenges in risk management is getting the business context right. And I've worked with a lot of organizations where if they don't have a good process taxonomy, then they really have a lot of challenges in what their operating environment, their 3 lines of defense, how they manage risks in an integrated type of way, how they do risk assessments, how they do reporting, and the trust that senior leaders and the board have from those reports. And then last is digital twin of an organization. So digital twin is a concept that's been around for a while, but predominantly in the physical environment. And what digital twin is, it's creating a model of your environment so that you could train AI and how that environment operates. And then once you start feeding it performance signals, like in manufacturing, they put IoT sensors on different stages within the manufacturing floor. Now you could start feeding that information, and you could get an understanding of you could do real-time monitoring, you could do predictive analytics, you could do content generation, you could do simulations. There's a lot you could do with this AI engine once you give it an understanding of that organization. Now, I came from banking, which is predominantly information based, and there is no way that I've seen, and I've studied this quite a bit, for any guidance on how to create a digital twin of an organization for an information-based organization. And I think the concept is very valuable, but once you kind of understand how to do it, which is you need to understand your process inventory in detail, map all that resource and context data, and then effectively train your digital twin on that. And as long as you keep humans in the loop, you could get all the benefits in an information-based organization that you get from the physical world. So I'm going to take a break right here and switch to a demo so you could see this not just in concept, but actually what this looks like. Slideshow. Okay. Can you guys see this the spreadsheet? Maybe
Yes,
Melissa.
it's coming
Perfect.
through. It looks great.
Okay, so this could be absolutely created in Avolution. I just created it in Excel for various reasons, but this is what a real process inventory looks like. And obviously it's a demo, but assume that I was in a consumer bank and they asked me to break down the retail lending environment. I would start with Jane, and these are all fictitious names, who's the head of retail lending, and I would say, what does your organization do? And she would say, I do loan origination, loan processing and underwriting, closing and funding, et cetera. Then I would go to the next level and say, Eleanor, can you describe what loan origination does? And she breaks it down. Ultimately, I get down to the individual processes that are executed as part of this business. And that's very important for what I'm going to show you from a digital twin perspective. But then you could see once I have that, now I could attach a lot of data to it. So who is the process owner? The person that needs to innovate and improve the process, but also the day-to-day performance. I give it a definition. I align it to products within the product taxonomy that it supports. I could say whether it's customer facing, direct, indirect, or internal, what systems it uses, what roles are involved. And this is what business capability it maps to. And I use
Michael, we're sorry to interrupt. We're just seeing it looks like your background now. I'm not sure if you're intending to share.
Okay. I moved it. Sorry. Can you
That's
see it now?
okay. Yes, we can see it. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. I moved screen. I didn't know I was going to lose it. So yeah, you could see all this information that I could tie to it. And this is where business capability comes in. So now because I've started with a process first approach and now I've linked it to capabilities. If someone says I need to improve my customer service capability, now I could understand every single organization that touches that, and now I could ask the next question of which one, and do some prioritization and do some design work. I also tied it to APQC process classification framework. And this is important because if I want to see like processes across different organizations, then it really gives me that benefit where if I want to drive standardization or rationalization, et cetera. But in the spreadsheet, I also summarize the roles, I define a KPI all through the levels of this. And then from a risk management perspective, this is really key as well, is now, since I have the list of processes, I could ask AI, and I give it some assumptions like a small US bank. I could say, what are the regulators that govern this, and what are the regulations that I need to adhere to for this set of processes? But then I created a risk registry, which is really like your GRC platform. But I use the same process taxonomy. These are the same exact names. And I could align regulatory risk, operational risk, resiliency risk. And as you can see, I defined the risk statement, the applicable regulation, which in this case is Equal Credit Opportunity Act. What is the regulatory obligation, and what is the control? And then I could do some scoring associated with this. And this is important for a couple of reasons, and I showed you the alignment to the product taxonomy, is in traditionally scoring for risk, which is the inherent risk, which is if we did nothing. The residual risk is what is the current state after controls have been applied, and then the target risk of risk rating of where do we want to be is typically rated at a risk level. But if you create this structure, now I could roll up what is the riskiness of my process, what's the riskiness of my process area or my organization. Since I've tied it to a product taxonomy, now I can start doing reporting of what is the riskiness of a product. There's a lot of different things I could do once I anchor to this common language. Okay, now let me switch to one other thing. And it looks like we're decent on time.
Yes, doing well on time.
Perfect. Okay. You can see this Claude interface?
Yep, we can see that. It's coming through great.
Okay, perfect. So what I did is now created a digital twin interface. So to really take this from the conceptual to real. And as you could see, all these JSON files, I took that spreadsheet of all that information and converted it into JSON files. And I also added some additional performance metrics. So you could see, I asked it to create performance metrics for the business performance, for trending for the last 3 months, such as portfolio growth rate, yield, cost per loan originated, customer experience metrics, compliance and audit findings, system performance data, finance costs, and external data around what the environment is. And I asked it to create this based on the PESTEL framework. So what are some political factors, economic factors, social, technological, environment factors, legal, et cetera. So there's no limit to the amount of data that you could feed to a digital twin, but really what you're doing is I've now educated, I've trained, and I use that kind of loosely because I don't think it's technically trained, but I've trained this Claude model on everything that my business does, every process, every resource, how they relate together. I've given it performance metrics. So now I could do a lot of cool things where I could say, I want to replace my lending platform. Can you create a and you'll see it may take a second, but it's it will now create my project charter, which you could see is who the sponsor is, what's the project purpose, business justifications, some things about the metrics that I've given it. And then it says, here's my in-scope processes. So it directly gives me all the in-scope processes. Now that's important because now I know the owner of that, and I could tie it to, if I could go on and create more information on this, is who are the technology teams that service, who is the testing teams, where do the business analysts sit? So now if I wanted to, I could create project plans, and I could even load load in estimation model. So now I could ask it to create a full timeline and budget estimate. And always, there's always humans in the loop. You can't trust AI for everything, at least right now. But what you'll see in here, and it should give me, it gives me the phases, the budget, and it should give me the timeline as well. 15 months, et cetera, all the risks. So it really accelerates, because I've given it all this knowledge, that it really accelerates everything that I need to create. There's another prompt that I want to give it too. So, I mentioned strategy before. I'm going to stop this one. So I give it this prompt that for this bank, I'm on the strategy team. One of the first steps I want to do is conduct an internal and external analysis for strengths, weaknesses. I'll say opportunities and threats. Can you provide a heat map based on business performance at the L3 of this taxonomy? And you'll see that it creates that, which, going back to my initial assumption, is the reason why enterprise architects are stuck in the IT is because they're not really bringing anything to the table. But if you could construct something like this and then pull in all the data, now I could see, and this aligns directly to the taxonomy that I showed you. Now it's giving me the performance of each of these different areas. And one of the things you could do too is create a real-time performance monitoring tool that shows this if you construct the right data and feed it into this digital twin engine. But you could see everything, how my business is doing, some critical weaknesses, metrics, really everything that I need to do for it. And then here's my SWOT analysis, my strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So this could be scanning the environment really in a real-time basis at any point. And I could use it for my people environment too. So if I want to say, can you create a SOP for verify status, which is a process in my process inventory, you could see that it takes all that data that I give it, and actually in my project files I set up, this is the format that I want, but it will give me this the standard operating procedure, which shows the scope, where it sits in the taxonomy, the roles and responsibilities, and then I also asked it to give me the trigger event. So what actually starts this? What's the upstream and downstream process for those that really want to know kind of end to end? What kicks off this process? Where do I hand off to? What's some of the input data, the outputs, and then gives me all the steps. And it should give me the risk and compliance needs as well. Yeah, regulatory compliance. Here's the regulations that I already mapped to it, and audit points. So you can see the wealth of information that it gives you. And drop in the comments any other examples you want me to type into this to see, since I might be a little bit ahead of schedule.
Yeah, if anyone has any examples, please feel free to put it in the chat or the Q&A. This is quite interesting.
Yeah. So, and if I'm hiring, and if I look at my roles here, let's say, let's see, closing agent. I want to hire a new closing agent. Really, there's no limit to what you could do with this. And I could create interview guides. I could create performance plans. And if you collect all that performance data at a process level, I could even inject that into my performance review process, so I can understand, what employees are performing, which ones are underperforming. I could look at the technology environment. If I fed this cost information, such as here's because it's organizationally based, what's the headcount at each level? What's the average salaries? What is the technology cost? I could do kind of a activity-based costing, so I could understand the cost of each process versus the value that it provides. So really, there's no limit to what this thing can do. How does this link to Avolution? That's a good question. In order to create the digital twin, you need to model the environment. As you could see in my example, I did that in spreadsheet. Spreadsheet is not the right answer. If I needed to add a bunch of processes, I'd have to update multiple tabs. So Avolution is a great platform to do all that modeling. There're probably some more conversations of how Avolution can evolve in the future to tie into AI in a way that leverages all this information. But I'll say there are no modeling tools today that enable you to do this. So opportunity.
Yeah, stay tuned. I know we've got some AI stuff in our roadmap, so we're certainly looking into it. I will say that. I think it's top of mind for everyone.
It's top, exactly. So I'm gonna switch to my PowerPoint. I have a couple more slides, and then we could jump to some questions.
Perfect. Sounds great.
So the implications of all this is it will require a dedicated team. Call it a process capability, call it a process center of excellence. But one of the questions I always get is, okay, I'm going to interview the business and understand all their processes, but the business changes all the time, which is true. So you'll need a dedicated group of people, process center of excellence, let's call it, or process capability, that cares and feeds for this thing so that it always maintains its relevance. And that's done through a couple ways. One is periodic attestations, and you can define a policy for 3 months, 6 months, whatever it is, to go back to the business, engage with them, and make sure that everything is accurate and complete. But the better way is all those use cases that I showed you in the bubble diagram. The more the business uses it, the more push there is to maintain this accuracy, because they don't just see it as, oh, process is something that I don't really get, it doesn't deliver anything for me. They see it as a foundation for everything that they do. So in order to do that, I've developed a playbook, and there's these 5 things that I think you really need to tackle with that. One is the strategy. You have to have an understanding of why you're doing this, and it's going to be different context for everybody, for every different organization, and it's got to be linked with the broader organizational context. So if the organization is focused on cost, it should be tailored to that. If it's focused on risk and compliance, it should be tailored to that. If it's focused on digital transformation, et cetera, et cetera. So really tailoring that strategy so that it's aligned to what the organization needs. Second is frameworks and standards. So I mentioned before the meta model, and not every every model type is needed for every organization. So it's really taking that and defining what are the model types, what's the metadata I need to collect, what's the source of that data, how does everything connect together so I create that one unified view that everyone's looking at the same version of truth depending on their perspective. Really getting details around even your standards. So what does a good process model look like? What's the standards for decomposition when creating a process taxonomy, naming standards, et cetera. There's a lot that goes into that, and it's important because you want to be able to have process models that look similar in any organization that anybody could pick up and understand without a detailed understanding of that business. A process model, in my view, should never read like an inside joke. So anyone should be able to read and understand it. The value case definition. So how are you going to use this to add value within the organization? That goes to the bubble diagram that I mentioned. and how you define how you want to use this to add value will really tailor and dictate what frameworks and standards you're gonna create. People operating model environments. So what are the roles and responsibilities, the accountabilities internal to the center of excellence and external? So stakeholders, like what is the role of a process owner? What is the role of the value stream owner? What's the role of the business in validating this information? And then of course, tooling. Getting a tool like Avolution, not just selecting it, that's the tool based on your needs, but also configuring it and operating it in a way that aligns to what your strategy is. And then a little bit more on some of the roles that I see within the Center of Excellence. So obviously you need a strong leader, and you need sponsors. So you need some sponsors that really get this, that see the vision, that could open doors for you, tackle challenges. But then you need a Center of Excellence leader that really gets this concept, that's dedicated to quality and making sure that completeness is first and foremost when creating this. You need modelers, so people that go out, engage with the business, have those conversations, create the process taxonomies, create the process models, do value streams or whatever models you're creating, but then make sure that they adhere to standards, that they link up to different model types in the right way. Demand management, so making sure that you have some project management capabilities to balance everyone's looking to get your time and the work that you could do for them. Make sure you have a prioritization framework. Maintaining the process standards. I think this is very important of being clear in what you document, of what a good process model looks like, what a good taxonomy looks like, and then sharing those broadly. Governing the assets, and part of that process standard is quality review control. And I always do 3 levels. So modelers should obviously review their own stuff according to the checklist, a peer review, and then a centralized check on it just to make sure that it does meet the qualities to be submitted into the modeling platform. Governing the assets, I already mentioned, doing those periodic attestations. There's going to be data feeds from all those different sources, so make sure you're on a regular schedule. You can manage conflicts of data. You could manage all the reports, the impact analysis, everything that a tool like Avolution can give you. And then just managing the platform, the data, getting right controls. So there's a lot that goes on into this. But that digital twin thing I mentioned, I've seen some estimates that there could be up to a 40% increase in productivity if you were to adopt something like that, which is just one of them. There's a lot of different metrics out there. But I think this is worth it to get control and understand your environment so that you could drive change faster and you could hit all those operational excellence metrics. So with that being said, I'm open for questions.
Excellent. That was really helpful. We've definitely got some questions that have come in. I'm really glad to see those. Everyone else, please feel free to add your questions in the Q&A mechanism, which is at the bottom of your screen. So, someone did ask, what happens when there are no existing processes? There are no process tools or systems. Does the framework change the structure or the successful implementation of it?
So if there's no processes, I think you just start with your interview process. Obviously, you need to do your thinking and create the process playbook and make sure you're clear and you can tell the story to your stakeholders of what you're doing. But just start interviewing people within your organization. Pick an organizational unit, start at the top, and then just ask them what they do, and then work down. If you don't have a tool, it's not a great answer, but I think you could start with spreadsheets and Visio diagrams. Obviously, you lack the object-orientedness of a tool. You lack the reports, the impact analysis, all the dynamic capabilities. But it starts a start, it's better to just start small with one organizational unit, show some benefits, especially if you're going to do something like the digital twin concept that I showed you, and then build the case to get a more proper tool.
Excellent. Yes, you need to start somewhere. Someone mentioned that the main issue they face with their customers is lack of business vision. Like where will they be going in the next 5 to 10 years? What step of your method would help with that?
Well, I think a lot of the like what I showed with the digital twin, the digital twin and creating the performance heat map. If you could show tangibly where different parts of your businesses are struggling, or there's opportunities, or there's strengths, and you could put that in front of them and say, okay, this is at least a data point, and this is where the broader thesis of where enterprise architects can take an elevated role, because they're bringing real data to the table, and they could start those conversations. And every organization has discretionary funding that they have to spend every year, theoretically. Maybe some don't. But now you could start the conversation of what do you want to spend this year? What do you want to spend next year? Like, what do you want to spend 5 years down the road? And maybe even back them up into a strategy based on some of that data that AI can help you collect, AI and this process information.
Great. I really liked what you had to say about, kind of elevating enterprise architecture and making it more than just a technology thing. I thought that was
Yep.
really, really interesting and has a lot of truth to it. Of the 10% of EA practices that report directly to the CEO, someone's wondering, have you noticed a difference in the composition, backgrounds, or tenures of the EA teams that are reporting to the CEO? And is that reporting structure intentional, or is it just a happy accident that they happen to be report to the
So yeah,
CEO?
so I'll admit I don't know any that report directly to the CEO, but I'll say what I think is happening is a lot of EAs grow up from a technology background. They're coders, they're solution architects, they're obviously good at what they do, and they get promoted to enterprise architects, but they don't have that business mindset. And I suspect the ones that report directly to the CEO are more strategists that really understand the bigger picture. And that's what you're getting with this framework is ability to paint the bigger picture that gets you to that table. I think there's another assertion that I have too is I think there's a gap in leadership at that C-suite because who's really designing the enterprise? The CEO is too busy. The COO maybe in some cases, but in a lot of cases, they're really just focused on operations and performance of the environment, but no one's really architecting the entire enterprise. And I think there's a real gap there that could be filled with an enterprise architect with the right vision.
Right. What's your vision or opinion on how value streams and process should be documented? Can they coexist?
Of course, yeah. So value stream is end to end. So from start of an idea all the way through completion, but they span organizational contexts. So which is great because you want to know that. But the tie that I mentioned in the meta model is every stage, say L2 or L3 stage, should be tied directly to a process in an organizational unit within that process inventory. So now I could see the end-to-end chain from that perspective. But if there's a problem at one part of that value stream, now I could tie directly to where the work is actually happening on the ground, and I could do my research of what needs to be addressed there. So they absolutely need to coexist. One's cross-organizational unit and one specific to organizational unit. If you marry those together, they become very powerful.
Excellent. Great. You had mentioned a 40% gain, um, I think in your previous response. How
Yeah.
did you come up with that number? Is it
So
validated?
So a lot of those numbers, and I have more numbers, but they come from digital twins, which has been around for a long time. So the digital twin market is expected to be a $183 billion market by 2030, and it's growing at a 41% annual growth rate. And so it's not a new digital twin is not a new concept. So I took a lot of those numbers and assumed that it will apply to information-based organizations. This digital twin of an organization, in my opinion, doesn't exist because no one's really solved how you do the modeling. So there's a lot of, I assume that it'll apply, and we'll see once somebody actually takes it up. But I think that's the best anchor that I have.
Okay, great. So someone's wondering what made you decide to use Cloud, I'm not quite sure how you say it, but to create your
So
agent.
So Claude is one of the only AI platforms that allows you to create projects. So as you could see, I uploaded all those files. So if I were to go to, and I think ChatGPT might have that ability now. I'm not exactly sure, but if I went to just another tool that didn't have the ability to create projects, every time I shut, I could give it context. So I could say, here's my process inventory, here's some other data. But every time I close that session, all that knowledge is lost. With Claude, I could create those projects, upload those files, and whenever I go into it, now it understands the context from which I'm asking those questions.
Okay, great.
And that's kind
And
of the training the AI.
the same person asked, what was the knowledge base built on? Was it built on a retail banking process inventory or on projects, initiatives, retail banking operations?
It was retail banking, and I didn't build it working with any specific organization, but I used AI to go back and forth with, and I've worked in lending, so I know a good amount about it, but really constructed of like, what are the big parts? And I would say, you're missing something, add this, et cetera. And then I just kept walking it down until I created that. And then once I created it, I created all my libraries for what systems are used, what risks and controls, which I used AI for, really created this whole environment. It is a illustration, it is a prototype. In a real world environment, you would work with your stakeholders to get that information that reflects how the business actually operates.
Great. All right. So, in everything that you've talked about, do capabilities still play a role in your approach? And I think, you said that yes, they do. But can
They
you
do.
talk a little bit more about that?
So, so in this view, since I started with the process inventory, so now I understand the nuances of what my organization does in detail, and then I tie each to a business capability. That gives me the best of both worlds. So if I wanted to create a heat map based on business capabilities, I could do that. If I wanted to have discussions with the business about their specific processes, I could do that because they're both tied together. In a lot of like the Business Architecture Guild or TOGAF or you name it, they don't really give guidance on how to tie those two worlds together. I know Business BA Guild has capability instances, but they don't tell you how to do that. And unless you have a rigorous approach to get the details of what each business does, then it's you're gonna miss things. The in a lot of businesses today, some organizations may do their funding and strategy by business capabilities, but a lot of the funding could be just allocated to a specific business unit, and they're not thinking about capabilities. They're thinking about the processes within their environment. So this gives you the best of both worlds, where I could look at the environment from either lens, and they both resolve to the same truth.
Yeah, it makes sense. It looks like someone noticed that you utilized APQC PCF, and they're wondering if you can also use TOGAF along with what you've been talking about.
Um, the TOGAF business capability model, absolutely, yeah, yeah. You could either take a business capability model off the shelf. If it's reflective of enough of your business, you could create it yourself. Really, anything applies. For this example, I just took some things off the shelf like APQC.
Perfect. Makes sense. What strategies have you seen that have proven most effective in getting C-suite and senior business leaders to understand and invest in building a comprehensive process inventory?
So one, I think you need to create a good story. So create that playbook, that strategy of what you're going to do, why you're doing it, and what benefits they could see. But also, I think start small. So take one business unit, do the process inventory. If you're going to do the digital twin, link it to that, and really show people in the show not tell kind of way. Show people how it benefits the environment, and then grow from there. So, but build your stakeholders, continue to tell your story, and that's a big part of what the CEO leadership needs to do, is continue to tell that story of why this is better for the environment.
Makes sense. Again, back to where you've said that, EA needs to elevate beyond technology. Do you have any suggestions for people who want to kind of push that in their organization and go beyond the IT space?
I think it comes back to that root cause is, I think enterprise architects aren't invited to the strategy table, for instance, because they bring nothing to the table. So, anything you're not bringing anything to the table that the people at the table find valuable. So create an asset that really is valuable, that gives them what they need so that they're armed to make the right decisions. And then you will start to elevate out beyond that IT specific role.
Excellent. Great. And I think we have time for about one more. What are the biggest organizational or cultural challenges in convincing an enterprise to shift from a capability led or other established EA approach to a process first mindset? Do you have some advice on how to make that shift?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of ingrained thinking and we've all come across these people of, we can't do it that way because we've never done it that way before. And you're gonna have to build your champions, create the story, build successes, and then grow from there. working with and identifying the stakeholders that are the biggest blockers and coming up with strategies of how you could win them over to your side. But I think if you start with something like that digital twin I showed you and really showed all the benefits of embedding AI deeply into your process environment, I think a lot more will come around.